and we'll get going. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, welcome, and welcome to 2021. I don't know if that changes anything, but here we are, right? I mean, so it's a good year. It's sunny up here. It's cool. It's beautiful as always, but it's a good day here on the mountains. So I hope everyone is doing well and can can relate with what we're going to talk about today. I hope we'll make it interesting. I think we'll make it interesting. Let's just make sure everybody's in here and going and good to go. Let's see. All right. So, hello, Jan from Norway, and hello, Will from Erie, PA. Good to see everybody. I'm going to pull up. We're going to jump right in here. I'm going to pull up my little dog and pony show here. Let's see. I should know how to do this. Like, it should be second nature, but it never is for me. Syracuse show, January 2nd. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. Review present. There we go. And Renzo, hello, Renzo. And Sasha, happy New Year to you, brother. How do we say it? Wie heißt das? How do you say that in German? I know Frohe Neue Jahr, something like that. My German is as bad as my Spanish. Happy New Year to you, Linda. Good to see you. With 7 days of quarantine, because you've been exposed to COVID. No, I hope you don't have COVID. That would be awful. Move to the mountains and you don't have any people around you. You can Frohes Neues. There you go. Danke, vielen Dank, Dankeschön. Okay, let's do this. Let's jump over here. Of course, we know everybody's got the Happy New Year bugs and all that good stuff. But here's what we're going to talk about today. I don't see John in here yet, but maybe he'll show up. I'm going to follow up on Gamble's book, just recap that developer. And if John shows up and he's done an experiment, I'm getting so close now. We're about a week out from moving into our house. I shouldn't even say that, but I'm going to put it out there. But once we get that in and going, I'm going to have a studio set up, and we're going to start back in the hardcore lab stuff again. I'm looking forward to it. Yes, it definitely moved to the mountains. I hope you don't have that, Linda. I hope you're okay. Get that tested and get it taken care of for sure. So then we're going to do some technical questions and answers. If anybody has some, I got an email from Paul this morning out of the UK. Maybe just give a little chat about what some new people are doing and how this process unfolds for a new person a little bit. And then I'm going to spend a little time on making connections with your work, right? How do you create a narrative? We've talked about this a lot in the past, but really at the end of the day, you can't iterate or talk about this stuff enough because it's really important. And I think I'll make a good point here. You guys you be the judge of it. Whether you're watching or listening now or after, whenever, send me some feedback if you have feedback. And then plans for 2021. Not that I have any breaking massive news about the wet plate collodion world in 2021, but we'll raise some questions like, is this going to be the year? I hope no one's doing workshops now. Maybe they are, but coming together and having this virus around, I don't think I haven't done a workshop since March. I have done nothing photo related. Everything was canceled for me, and my Studio Q business has been shut down since March. So I haven't done anything that way. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the potential things that might happen in 2021 if we do get either a stick in the arm or both or whatever. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. But that's kind of what we have on tap for today. So let's start with Gamble's book. Remember, we talked about this saltpeter potassium nitrate developer recipe, and we talked about a whiter deposit, basically a brighter image using this potassium nitrate or saltpeter, some people like to call it. We talked a little bit about it still has ferrous sulfate in it, still has glacial acetic acid, and it has nitric acid in it as well. So you're holding this stuff back, depositing more silver. I think John, if I'm not mistaken, was going to run a test on this a couple of weeks ago, but I don't see him in here yet. Maybe he'll show up and we can see what he's done. But again, one of the things that I wanted to reiterate, if you look down at the bottom here, let me grab my little pointer. If you look down at the bottom right in here, you'll see that alcohol is added when required in the proportion of 15 to 20 minims per ounce of solution. So this is really what I wanted to recap. What he's talking about here is he's not using any alcohol in the developer. And I know that's strange for some people. We've talked about it in the past. And remember what alcohol in the developer is for. It's to help with flow. So you don't get the starts and stops in your developer, and you get the sweeps, or you get the black edges where the developer didn't quite get to, those kinds of things. But having said that, we can come back to that if we need to. I had an email from a person, I believe in Belgium or France. I can't remember. The countries get convoluted. They get mixed up in my head, but somewhere in Europe there. And this gentleman talked about, he said, wow, I really like what you did last week on the preparation of plates for prolonged exposures. And he talked about a museum or an archive in his village or town that he'd like to be able to go in there and photograph these spaces and or objects. I can't really remember, but it's window light, very low light, super long exposures. And one of the things he asked me, he said, I'd really like to try that solution, but I have no idea what a 30 grain bath is. And if you read the old literature, if you read the 19th and 20th century literature on the wet plate collodion process or the wet collodion process, you'll see a lot of these old boys talk about a 30 and 40 grain bath. And I want to break that down right now with you. There is no hard and fast rule about the amount of silver in your bath. There are some things that can complicate the quality of the plate, but there are reasons why you'd want a lower SG or specific gravity or content of silver in your bath, and reasons you might want it a little bit higher. And they have to do with how iodized or highly iodized your collodion is or not. But in this case, he talks about a 30 grain bath, and 1 grain is 0.0648 grams, basically. So a 30 grain bath is 7.8% silver bath, or 78 grams to a liter of distilled or deionized water. And we talked about the glacial acetic acid as the restrainer, the distilled water. And then number 2 here, the pure glycerin. And right here you see specific gravity, and he tells you what specific gravity that glycerin should be. And then he tells you about the mixture. And I always found it fascinating here. The plates will stand 21 days exposure, but deteriorate slowly. I think after 3 weeks, that's probably a long enough exposure if you need an exposure for 3 weeks. But the point being is there are great safe ways that if you want to get around not doing dry plate collodion or gelatin dry plate, a little more modern variants or process, and you want to use and have that wet collodion look and feel, this is a great way to conquer these drying out plates. And we talked about resensitizing the silver bath and all those kinds of things. And so there's some good information just in Gamble's book. Obviously, you saw the list I have. He's on there. He's a later book, 1895. A lot of good information. If you haven't gone to Google Books and grabbed that, please do that and read it. It is an easy read. There's some things in there, just like every book, that you might not be that interested in, but the content is wonderful, especially the beginner, or the advanced. I mean, you'll love what you find in that book. So I just wanted to reiterate that for him, and show you guys a 30 grain bath and a 40 grain bath. So if you come in to this, if you start reading this literature and you come across these obscure, mysterious references to what a 30 grain bath, what is that? Now you know. Or you can just take the grains to grams and figure it out yourself. So that's pretty straightforward. if anybody has any technical questions, we can do this anytime, but I just threw this in there just so you can come in, chime in, unmute yourself, and get right into the mix here, and we'll answer your questions. And I'll try to keep an eye on the chat as well, too. If you don't want to unmute, if you want to chat, that's fine. But that's okay. We'll come back to that. Here's what I really want to talk about today. I know people come in for the technical, and that's great, but we often overlook the why reasons versus the what reasons. Like, what do you do to get this, or what lens are you using, or what collodion, or what developer? We always like to talk about that, thinking that it's going to translate over into and it could translate over into better technical images, but it will do nothing for you in the sense of conceptual images or narrative images or storytelling images, however you want to say this. There's a lot of people out there that will absolutely poo-poo this topic or just dump on it, right? There's a lot of people out there that don't feel like they need to address these ideas, meaning the ideas of having your photographs mean something or telling a story with your photographs. So these are 4 questions that all in the next couple of slides we'll talk about. Why is it important to connect a story or narrative to your work? Why is that? You know, think about that for a minute, and we'll discuss this a little bit and see if we can make sense of any of this. How do you make connections with the process in your story? A really big thing for me is connecting the materials and the process that you're working with the idea or the concept of your work, right? So when I see projects made, very few, but when I see projects made in the wet collodion process, I wonder, why did that artist or photographer choose the wet collodion direct positive, the wet collodion negative, and a certain type of pop print, or the digital film, or you know, whatever process you're using? What connections can you make, or how do you make connections with the materials in the process and your work? I've given a few examples of this in the past, especially with materials. Working in Germany, doing the Vergangenheitsbewältigung, coming to terms with the past project. I talked a lot about KCN, the fix that I use in the process, potassium cyanide and Zyklone B used in the gas chambers in Europe. I talked about the glass plates and Kristallnacht and the broken glass, those kinds of things. So you start tying in both the materials, and then in the period too, like for my ghost dance work, that time period, right? That's really important. And so I'm not talking about making documentary work. I'm not talking about telling the truth with a capital T, right? This objective, truth. I'm talking about making art, using materials, using processes that are relevant to your narrative or to your story, and combining, weaving that in, if you will, writing about it, studying about it. My graduate degree allowed me to explore different disciplines and come back to the process in photography that I use and make bigger connections, other methods of making artwork, reading psychology books and philosophy books, working with different types of materials, not just photography. I mean, there's so many things, and we'll look at a slide here that kind of reiterates this. There's so many things that you can venture into and explore and gain so much. And when you come back to making plates or making photographs, you have this wider world view, right? This bigger world view of what you're doing and why, and making those connections. So, and then another one, why can't I just make pretty photographs? And this is interesting. I'm going to raise this topic on one of the slides, talking about the digital media and Instagram, the one-off standalone photos that we just swipe through. This is really having an impact on how, especially younger people, are trying to process narrative or trying to tell stories with their work. This kind of quick Instagram one-off image is a very, in my opinion, a little bit detrimental. But we'll have that discussion. And then the last thing, I've heard anything and everything is art. Why do all of this? That's the great escape. When you don't have anything to say about your work, and and it's the reason is you just made the pretty pictures, or you've done, you know, whatever it is, the standalone pieces. When you don't have anything to say about your work and you want to envelop or put it around, wrap the word art around it, it's really easy to just cop out and say, I don't, you know, you look at it, you decide what it's about. And there's a lot of people out there that will do this, right? I'm of the school, and I'm happy to have this conversation or this argument, not argument, but this debate. Let's say debate. I'm happy to have that debate about the premise or the framework of creating photographs, in this case, to tell a story and have a narrative rather than just kind of one-off random, there's nothing behind these photographs kind of images. I'm not saying there's no value in those. What I'm saying is, and you know, you look at the 19th century, and art for art's sake was a real movement, right? It's like, here's a rock. It's a beautifully well-lit photograph, and it means nothing. It's just beautiful, and there it is, and enjoy it, right? And if you look at MGM, the film, big California Hollywood film, the lion that comes out at the first of the movie, and you see that ribbon up top. In Latin, it says art for art's sake. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, those are some of the things. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything over here. Hey, Paul, good to see you. We're going to talk about your stuff here in a second, if you don't mind. Let's just talk about this. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just going to kind of highlight a couple of things. The photograph is a single moment in frozen in time and removed from the timeline. Put this way, photography as a medium is almost completely incapable of creating a story. So first he makes, and we'll talk about who's talking here, but first they make a point that you know, nonverbal, something nonverbal in nature, can photography tell a story or create a narrative? That's what he's setting up for. And what I just talked about, these standalone images, it's almost impossible, or they say it's incapable of creating a story. Yet, in her essay, Pictorial Narrativity, Wendy Steiner states that while it's unusual for a single image to tell a story, it has been common throughout history of the arts for an image to imply a certain story or remind the viewer of a story he or she already knows. That's the caveat here, right? So if you photograph familiar objects, familiar places, or even implying that there's somewhere or something or somewhere else, you're putting in the mind of the viewer something, reminding them about something they already know. That's what they're talking about there. In this way, the photograph can depict a moment within a larger story, and the viewer is able to draw upon the story he or she already knows. Thus, this kind of photograph can be considered a narrative because it recalls a story through association. That's a big point. This is called a stage narrative photography, or tableau. We can say that too, right? That's another way to say it, where images are staged purposefully with the idea of a narrative in mind. And if you guys know Gregory Crewdson, he's if you've ever seen any of his work, that's what he basically does. He stages these tableaus or these narratives to tell a story. A lot of his stuff, if you haven't seen him, you should look him up. He works on 8x10. I think it's 8x10 Ektachrome. Maybe it's, I don't know what he works on now. Large format color film, I think, is what he works in. Some process. And then he obviously takes them in digitally, and he does all of his stuff there. But that's the first kind of basis or kind of thing that we're looking at. Photographs as clues, and this kind of goes back to this association idea. When you're developing a narrative or a story, or you have something you want to say or ask or question or comment on or love or hate or whatever it is you're doing, there's got to be some drive in you telling you or really preoccupying your mind about, wow, I need to get this out. I got to get this out. I want to talk about this. I want to explore this. I want to express this, right? That's what we're really talking about. When you're working through that, and you may use that tool of association, that this universal object or this universal location photographed will imply a certain thing in a complete stranger's mind, because most people know what memories that would bring up for them. So it might not be too much of a stretch to say that all photographs allude to some sort of story, however vague it might actually be. While narratives are powerful, how we interpret them and how they make us feel changes dramatically with our point of view, right? That is so obvious and so true. You bring to the photograph all your life experience and filters and ideas. When you see certain things, and again, going back to association, when you see certain things or places or events or whatever it is, you're going to lay those existing preconceptions on it. And that's what we do, right? And our emotional state when we experience that. So changes dramatically with our point of view, our existing preconceptions, and our emotional state when we experience them. Photographs aren't really entities of their own. Instead, they point to something else, whether that something else is a story, a feeling, an idea, or simply its maker's expression to affirm her or his presence. Photography can create a narrative, but the most powerful role of photography is its ability to complement narratives rather than express them, and frame stories rather than tell them. That is so critically important, right? So again, we're not talking about documentary work here. We're not talking about photojournalism. We're talking about fine art work, using photography, the medium of photography, to tell a story, to put together a narrative of something that's on your heart and in your head that you need to express. And that's a great way to say it right there. The professor and political scientist David Campbell says that in telling visual stories about the world, photography is narrating the world. That's wonderful. Outlining that narrative is something far larger than photography. Yet the narrative in photography is so often connected to the context, right? We talk about context and intention all the time in this show, or a lot of times in this show. The narrative of Dorothea Lange's famous photo Migrant Mother becomes apparent only if the viewer is aware that it was captured during the Great Depression. That context is king. I always say this, right? Context is king. It always is, always has been, and always will be. Very, very important to address that. So if you had never seen this photograph before and you have no context of Dorothea Lange's work, it would mean something completely different to you. But I think most everyone in here watches this show or listens to the show as a photographer, so you'd have some idea of Dorothea Lange's work. So there's a couple implied ideas. Association, photography isn't the end all. It's a bigger thing we're doing when we include narrative in a story. And those are the references there. Just FYI, I didn't write that. I'm just repeating it. Okay. Let's get into some of the problem areas now of why this is so difficult for people to do. And I see it becoming more and more difficult. I've been out of undergraduate school for, I don't know, 25 years. I don't know. I'm only 30, so I was young when I went. But no, I've been out of undergraduate school for a long time. I've been out of graduate school for a long time. But in undergraduate school, I started in 89. Got out, graduated in 93. In that time period, it seemed to be the generation and the people in those courses were adaptable to this idea of telling stories or narrative. And basically what I'm doing in today's show is I'm giving you a little condensed uni lecture about what photography, direction photography should and can take, and the overarching idea of narrative or story. This is what you learn in undergraduate school. So let's talk about a couple of problem areas within that. And this is Grant Scott here. Without engaging with an understanding of narrative beyond photographic practice, and I know for non-English speakers or people that's English is their second language, let me define that for you right there. It's really important. without engaging with an understanding of narrative beyond photographic practice. That means if you only see photographs as the thing itself, and you make a photograph and that's it, and there it is, and it stands on its own, you're going to have problems, because you've got to be equipped to talk about these images and this narrative, or this umbrella that you have over the work. So without engaging with an understanding of narrative beyond photographic practice, combined with an enjoyment of storytelling, it is impossible to develop narrative as a photographer. So if you're not equipped, if you don't understand narrative and storytelling, and I don't just mean in the typical way, in the way that you're employing it or should employ it in photography, you won't be able to create a narrative. You won't be able to. This is where a lot of people get hung up. They say, "God, Quinn, I hear what you're saying, but man, I don't have anything to really say. I like to get my stuff out and put it on the thing and photograph it, and it looks cool, and I put the light on it, and I try this, and I put tinfoil in it and make smoke and long exposure, all kinds of stuff, right?" And they're just cool, kind of novel ideas. These are those one-off kind of, a lot of people wrap it up, "Oh, I'm just doing technical stuff," and that's okay. But when they start putting it out as kind of, this is what I do, this is kind of my art, and they haven't understood narrative beyond that basic concept of what most people think it is, it's going to be impossible to find something you're passionate enough about to make an entire body of work of, because it's not going to make sense to you. It's definitely not going to make sense to other people. And this is just something you can't fake. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be authentic. So it is also extremely difficult to teach narrative to people who have never considered narrative as an essential aspect of photography. There's the second part. And in the last 10 years, going to colleges and universities here in Colorado, and when I was in Europe as well, not so much in Europe, but the last 10 years that I've been here in Colorado, I see this gradual, and that's all I do is photography courses, right? At uni, I even did a artist residency for a graduate program at UC Boulder, graduate MFA students. And I saw it there too. This is, if you've never considered storytelling and narrative as an important integral force in your image making, you're going to have a very difficult time getting these concepts or finding any meaning in them. And so over the years, all the pushback that I get every time I say, your work needs to have context and intention. Why are you making it? Why are you using this process? Why did you choose that variant? Why did you choose that format of plate? Why did you choose that pop process? Any of those questions, they kind of look at me dumbfounded, or they push back at me and say, I don't need to do that. Picasso didn't have an artist statement. All these kind of cop-outs that allow them, photographers get away with murder because it's so democratized. Everybody does it. You can just make random images and throw them online, and somebody's going to like them. Somebody's going to get in there and click and get your little dopamine farm going and give you little high hits off of it, that kind of thing, all that good stuff. And if you haven't read Jaron Lennard's book, 10 Reasons to Delete Your Social Media Accounts right now, you should read that book as well too. That's who I was just quoting, The Dopamine Farm. So that's a really good Grant Scott, really on point with that. And here's another Grant Scott. This goes into that book that I just mentioned there, the deleting your social media accounts. Really what technology is rewiring our brains. Nicholas Carr's book that I read 10 years ago, What the Internet's Doing to Our Brain, How It's Rewiring Our Brain. This is having an effect not only on photography, but on art and the narrative that I'm talking about now, and the ability to make that kind of work. It's almost like taking mental tools and intellectual tools away from people and, telling them to build something without those tools. It's very difficult. So Grant says, the limited character count of the tweet and the preoccupation with a single image on Instagram can reduce both attention span and the opportunity to develop complex and nuanced storytelling. That is fascinating and so absolutely true. And if you get into this and study this a little bit, you'll find this is driving photography today. This is absolutely driving photography today, because these people are now coming into the wet plate world, and they're trying to influence the wet plate world the same way they've influenced the digital or the one-off image and the social media stuff and all that. So and it's only going to grow and grow and grow. So I'm going to be this kind of weird old outlier on the mountains somewhere in the States, rambling about narrative and story and how important it is. But I'll talk in the end about what I plan to do here in 2021. But the idea here is that you can't let trends and those popularity, that contests and those, I got to get likes and I got to get subscribers and I got to get this and I got to get that. You can't let that drive you in your work, because all you're really doing, let's be honest, all you're really doing is playing to a global audience, trying to make photographs that people will like, and they mean nothing really to you. The only thing that means anything to you is that little dopamine click on your likes. If you get a lot of likes or you get good feedback, there's nothing wrong with that. But what it's doing, it's crippling you. It's not allowing you to be alone with your thoughts, introspective, taking in external information from other sources, reading books, watching documentaries, studying photography technically or conceptually, all those things. Then you're making those decisions. You're not putting work out there to have somebody justify it. You're putting work out there to tell a story about something you're concerned with, or something you have a question or an idea or something. It's got to be something connected to you that you're putting out there. Now, it's not saying you don't want feedback or you don't want dialogue. You absolutely want that. That's the catalyst for the purpose of the work, to me, is to put it out to the world and say, this is my idea, my comment, my question. What do you think? Or let's have a dialogue about this. It should be a catalyst to have conversation, not just to say, oh, that's pretty. Oh, that's cool. Oh, great light. What kind of collodion did you use? Are you using strobes? Is that a Euroscope lens? Is that a Chamonix camera? I mean, it's the old joke. Wow. That was a great meal you cooked. The stove just does a great job with that food, right? You're talking about a piece of equipment rather than the person actually putting this stuff together. So we default to this safe zone of never having to talk about the work, why we make the work, never having to be challenged about the work. There's so many easy cop-outs for photographers trying to get into the art world and make photographs. Man, you get online and you see this all over the place. People dabbling in this stuff that are absolutely clueless. And it's so apparent when you look at the work, and if they have anything to read, what they do write is just incredibly superficial and meaningless. But they have photographs that their people are associating something in their personal lives with, so they like them, right? That association thing. They're not directing that narrative. The viewing audience is directing that narrative, if there's a narrative. And that narrative is individual, subjective narratives. It's not an overall one concept idea. It's not that the artist is invested in this. It's that the artist has invested in nice equipment, nice lighting, beautiful objects or people to photograph, but there's no story there. They're visual candy to click on once and swoop on by. Click on once and swoop on by. There's no depth. Hey, well, thanks, brother. Yes. All right. You finish up later, brother. It's good to see you. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility as an artist or photographer to take on these ideas or these concepts, these problem areas that, and I'm not saying nobody can make fun off-the-cuff images and put them out. Absolutely, you can do that. I'm talking about when you're sitting down and you say, look, I want to get into an exhibition or a gallery or a museum, or I want to be published. I have a story, a narrative, a great body of work that I spend 2 years or 10 years on, and I have something to say. I have a topic that I want to put out to have a catalyst to create discourse and dialogue. That's what I try to do. I try to engage people, whether it's the Holocaust or the Shoah in Europe, or the Native American massacre sites here in America. I try to put work out that will engage people to talk about these things. And photography is a wonderful, safe way to do that, to bring people in, to engage them, to let them get thinking about there's so many times I've had people come to shows or come to, exhibitions, and they get there and they'll look around, they'll read a page of text on the wall, look at the photographs, and then come up to me and say, wow, I never knew you did this. I never knew it was this way and that way, and that you did work on, this topic and that topic, and engaging people on otherness and marginalized communities and all that. So it's a very, if you put it out there, people will get it, right? It may take you a while to refine it and understand it yourself, but if you put it out there in the right context, with the right imagery, the right verbiage, the right context, with the right intention, I think you'll be successful. Even if people don't like what you're talking about, even if they're not interested, at least they'll understand that there's some form to this, right? You don't walk in to a 2-hour movie in the kino or the theater an hour and a half into the movie, or an hour into the movie. You want to be there at the start, right? You don't open up a 400-page book to page 200 and start reading. You need context. You need to know what's going on, because at the end of the day, all we do is tell stories. That's all we do. Some do it better than others, but that's the way it goes. We talked about on photography here, right? Sontag's book quite a bit. I just want to read this. I think she sums it up so beautifully in the book. But the very question of whether photography is or is not an art is essentially a misleading one. Although photography generates works that can be called art, it requires subjectivity, it can lie, it gives aesthetic pleasure. Photography is not, to begin with, an art form at all. That's what I just said, right? She is so much better at it, right? I just basically butchered this idea and gave it to you in kind of lay terms, but all of it's there. Requires subjectivity, it can lie, it gives aesthetic pleasure. Photography is not, to begin with, an art form at all. Like language, it is a medium in which works of art, among other things, are made. Out of language, one can make scientific discourse, bureaucratic memoranda, meaning, bureaucracy, letters of bureaucracy, love letters, grocery lists, and Balzac's Paris. Actually, it shouldn't say Balzac. It should say Auger. Auger's Paris, Eugene Auger. And Eugene Auger's Paris. Or Balzac's Paris. Out of photography, one can make passport pictures, weather photographs, pornographic pictures, x-rays, wedding pictures, and Auger's Paris. Sorry, I misspoke. She does mean Balzac's. Well, what she's doing is she's comparing and contrasting the written word, what you can do with written words, and what you can do with photography. It's the same thing, right? You can make scientific discourse, bunch of bureaucracy, love letters, grocery lists. Same thing with photographs, passport photos, weather photographs, porno pictures, x-rays, or Auger's Paris. I love that. And that's Auger's prostitute taking her shift. Eugenie Auger. Beautiful work, beautiful work. All right, here we go. Let's talk about this for a minute. 2021. Will it be a good year? What do you guys think? Can we start teaching workshops and travel again? I guess really it's the vaccine stuff. I plan on taking 2021 pretty much for myself. I don't think I'll teach anything. I don't think I'll open anything up. I mean, if it does change over the summer, I don't know. It's a great question, because I've seen and actually received, emails and having conversations a little bit about this. What do you think 2021 will do? Are you going to teach again? When are you going to offer workshops again? That kind of thing. And I don't think it'll be in 2021. I really don't. I'll probably be back in the saddle, as we say in English, the idiom back in the saddle. I'll probably be back in the saddle in 2022, probably the spring and summer of 2022. I think this year I'll get set up in the spring. Well, before then, by the spring, I'll be working in my darkroom and studio, and I'm going to start on my project. My Red Mother Earth project is what I've titled it right now. I've talked before about the rock formations here, and I'm going to spend some time making negatives of that work, and then ultimately putting it on glass as oil prints. So what do you guys have planned for 2020? What's going on in your worlds? I'm interested to hear what people think about coming into 2020. Are we hopeful about it? Linda says, let me put these up here. I forget I can put them up here. Linda says, exactly what's happening on social media. You as a photographer show a picture and don't tell everything about the picture, the story behind it. Instead, they put up list how they did the picture. Exactly, Linda. Yeah, and those quotes that I just read off, especially Sontag's, if you go back and pause it, screenshot it, something, or look it up in her book, that's exactly what's happening, conflating these ideas. And then I think, let's go back. I want to bring up her. I want to bring this point up here real quick. So this one, these two from Grant Scott are probably my most favorite here. Without engaging with an understanding of narrative beyond photographic practice, combined with an enjoyment of storytelling, it is impossible to develop narrative as a photographer. It is impossible to develop narrative as a photographer. It is also extremely difficult to teach narrative to people who have never considered narrative as an essential aspect of photography. So, and we're moving into that stuff more and more all the time. And then we get to the social media kind of stuff. The limited character count of the tweet and the preoccupation with a single image on Instagram can reduce both attention span and the opportunity to develop complex and nuanced storytelling. This is the biggest problem that I run into. People will not devote the time to understand what you're trying to do with your work. And it's an uphill battle, but all you need to do is find one or two or three or four people that get it, and you can keep on that road and keep going down that road that, like Linda says, to tell the whole story. You're right. We do need to tell the whole story, no doubt about it. Pablo, we need a couple of vidants. What are vidants? I don't know what that is. Pablo, tell us what vidants are. So that's the idea. And what do you guys think? Do you have any plans for 2021? What are you going to do with? Here's a photograph I found today on the face bag. I thought it was really interesting to see that. It says, after the plague came the Renaissance. What is your Renaissance? What are you going to do for the Renaissance, right? We're coming out of the dark ages, 2020. We're supposed to all be inspired from this bug and this lockdown and all this stuff. So what is your Renaissance going to be? I say you should look at, some help to predict future times. Yeah, my plan is, Jeffrey says my plan is keep being hopeful. You're always good, Jeffrey. You're one of the most positive dudes I know. You never have a bad thing to say. You're always kind and happy and gracious. So you're a real mensch in my book. But this is the idea, right? This is the idea that we're moving out of this lockdown for 9 or 10 months, basically the whole year of 2020. Is this going to do anything for us? I have to be honest with you. 2020 was actually really quite good for us. We've been preoccupied with this house, selling the house in Denver and all this stuff. And we just haven't had a lot of time. Yeah, we were on lockdown. We do that, we wear masks. We try to limit our contact and all that. I'm not saying that we don't do that. But I can't say that the lockdown has changed anything in my artistic or photographic desires. Moving up here in the mountains, that's what's inspired me. I drive around in the mountains and look at these big, beautiful, sacred rock formations and this beautiful light and the different times of day and the different times of the year. it's just really, really inspiring that way. I like the idea, though, that after the plague came the Renaissance, which is actually true, right? I mean, it is true. And I would like to think we're going to have a Renaissance. I would like to think people will come back and start collaborating together again, doing workshops, doing, having events, creative events and things like that. That's always good for people to do. But I haven't really had anybody give me anything profound about what the lockdowns and the Renaissance, our 2021 Renaissance will be like. So I thought it was interesting, but I plan on keeping on the way we always have. And I don't really get affected by the populace too much that way. I try to keep my own head about me. Do we have anything technically that we want to talk about before we still have a few minutes here? So let's see, Renzo. Let's see what Renzo has. I think a lot of people don't tell a story visually, but even more people don't read photographs. They just swipe away. Yes, you're so right, Renzo. And that's that's the beginning of the narrative, right? Like we talked about, the photograph cannot be standalone. I mean, in the context of our argument or our debate today, the materials that I presented, they're talking about, in those quotes, they're talking about the photograph needs more help than just standing alone like that. So you're absolutely right. First is you read that photograph, then you read the context, and then you see if you're interested in the ideas or the intent behind them. Too many times I see monographs or books published with photographs are just kind of standalone images with, plate number 32, okay? Plate number 33, plate number 34, but they don't talk about anything, right? I love film. I love documentaries. I love stories of any kind. That's what we do as human beings. We sit around and tell each other stories. That's what we do. We are storytellers. We don't even know it, but we are. Some of us are better than others, and some of us aren't as good as some, but we are storytellers. And as an artist, and especially as a photographer, you have a way in to the mass population. Everyone knows what photography is. So you already have a leg up. So you refine that storytelling and those images and that context of the work and bring it in. April Williamson, hello. Being in the country, I will tell my story for myself. Maybe someday someone will understand me. That's it right there. If you read Sontag's book, that's exactly what it is. Absolutely. You tell your story. Whether 100 people like it or 1,000 people don't like it, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you tell that story. You express those burdens on your heart and in your head, and you put it out. Obviously, you want people to engage so you can have some conversation. But at the end of the day, that's your story for sure, April. Good comment. Linda says, my dream is to open a photo studio in my vintage shop and do portraits, hopefully in 2021. I hope so too, Linda. That would be wonderful. And if you can include in that commercial work, set aside a little bit of your personal fine art stuff and make work and portraits that have, I've always, anybody have the book, Working Stiffs? It's a little small book. If I had my library, I'd show it to you, but it's a little tiny book and it has ice makers and blacksmiths and carpenters and occupational portraits of the 19th century, all in tintype. And I've wanted to do a modern version of that, tell stories. I'm a blue collar hard worker, really. I mean, I'm not some, I wasn't raised with a silver spoon in my mouth, as we say. So I love the idea of doing modern portraits of blacksmiths and dairy farmers and these occupations that are all kind of going away. But yeah, if you can do that, Linda, that's a great way. Make you a little cash and get your speed up on Collodion and hopefully do a little personal work too. Yes, I hope you do as well. Hey, there's Andy. Sorry I missed your session, mate. Was in my darkroom keeping keep inspiring me. Hey, absolutely. Andy does a great, if you don't know who Andy is, you should go look at Flogger. He does that right there, flogger.co.uk. He does a great little podcast. He interviewed me and Justin Barocchi, he did before, and John Graybill. There's a lot of good interviews up there. Good to see you, brother. Good to see you. So yes, at the end of the day, all we can ask for is our own heart and mind guiding us authentically into things that we have a concern about. And if you're not concerned about anything, or you don't have a question about anything, make a narrative around the things that bring you joy or the things you just absolutely love. There's no limit on what your narrative can or can't be, but there must be a narrative, and you must learn how to construct that narrative within the context of photography and use that work to convey that story. And when you see stories that don't make sense, or when they claim they're stories and they don't make sense, or you don't quite understand the context of them, ask the artist, ping the artist, say, I'm sorry, I don't understand what this is. What are you trying to do here? See what they say. Don't be surprised if you don't get a response, though. That's the only thing, right? Sometimes people just don't want to have that conversation. I get that. I understand that. I like to have the conversation, but okay. One more chance. I should have moved this slide somewhere else, huh? Anybody have any technical stuff? Anybody want to ask any technical junk here? Technical junk time. Anything? Why are my images melting? By the way, that's my Frederick Scott Archer 11th century monastery in Heidelberg, Deutschland. I thought he'd photograph something like that, you know? I put it in that Archer show. I made a albumin, a salt, and the Wet Collodion negative as a triptych. It's quite beautiful. Has nothing to do with my story. The Archer story, of course, but not my story. So, nothing technical? Really cool. Okay. Well, if let me do this. Hold on. We haven't finished yet. I think Paul is okay if I share this email. Are you okay if I share this email, Paul? Tell me if you are. If you're not, I will not do it. But if you'll just chime in, he's in the UK. Paul, you want to let me share this? I think you will. He said he watched the video project of the Native American work. Lovely, a nice bit. Can I share this? I don't think. Let me see if he says it's okay. Yes, thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. I'm going to share your stop screen, share screen. I'm going to share this with you. That's not just him talking nice about me, but I just want to show you his. Paul is new in Wet Plate. You guys can see my email there, right? So speaking of narrative, if you haven't watched that little Sand Creek Massacre, I go down on the massacre site, and I think I only show making one plate of the witness tree, but he talks about Otis Taylor. I included Otis's song Sand Creek Massacre in there, and he talks about the kitchen towel there. So quick update on his progress. See, still waiting for ammonium iodide from the Ruskies, so still on the potassium-based stalls. That's fine. Filtered my silver bath, aired it for a few days, and it smelled a little solventy. Sunned it under my UV lamp. Built for carbon work, perfect. Added 10 grams of silver nitrate, 12.3 milliliters of 3% nitric acid. Results: SG percentage back to normal, 70 mark, perfect, and up from 60. And the pH shift from, that's quite basic, right? 5.5 to 6 down to 2.53. Perfect. Look at that. I love when people document stuff and send it to me like that. That's perfect. And he's reading the meniscus there. You can see that. That's wonderful. And then he even shows me his strips. There's the one before, and there's the one after. He's right on the money. And then he starts showing some work down here. So, Paul, you decided to shift to using his 1,000-watt UV grow lamp for still life setups in the darkroom. You know, this is really interesting. because when you talk about a UV grow light, 1,000-watt UV grow light, you're talking about 300 and almost marine lights, 380 to 450 nanometers. So you're not going to get some of that more blue indigo-ish you'll get, but the blue and some of the greens you're going to kind of sacrifice. But it's fine. Drastically drop my exposure times. Exactly. That's exactly what it'll do. It'll drop your exposure times down. And you can kind of see some of his progress here. So, Paul, let's talk about, there he is in his studio. Wavelengths covers. I took my UV. Awesome. Awesome. So let's talk about this. So he can see this. This is all oyster stained probably from your plate holder or something. Even these aren't comments in your developer. These are all little oyster bits too. A bit overexposed, yeah. What do you guys think? A bit overexposed, I think. But man, for a guy coming in, hats off to you. Hats off to you. Those look great. I mean, coming in, right? Again, oyster stains, some developer islands, overexposed, and maybe a little overdeveloped there, I think, maybe. And then these. Here's the kicker. If these were your last ones, you're really coming into it here. And you have to spray it to get that depth. That's fine. It's a nice portrait too, actually. Better light, everything. So you're coming right into it. So I really, he didn't ask me to show this. I asked him. So these are the kinds of emails that I get a lot of times with questions, but Paul and I have been talking for a while. So I really love it. If you have questions or need help with something like that, holler at me. Drop me an email. I'm happy to put it up and talk about it. Yeah, April, I agree. Much better than my first place. Mine too. Much better than my first place too. Absolutely. So Paul is coming along swimmingly, as we say in the UK. Swimmingly. That's a good word, right? Cheers, Hank. Cheers. Prost. What do you say in the Netherlands? I can't remember. Now, Prost is Germany. L'chaim is Hebrew. Cheers is the UK. Salud is Spanish. God, how many languages can I say good morning in? I don't know. 6 or 7 anyway. I love language. I told Pablo I'm practicing my Spanish on Pablo. So I'll sit down and write something to Pablo, and then I'll copy it and put it in Translate to see if I'm right. I've been nailing it, man. Conjugating verbs, conjugating irregular verbs. It's good stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are a wonderful audience. I consider each and every one of you a friend. You're so gracious and kind to me. You support me. You come in here and spend an hour with me every week. I do not appreciate that. I appreciate it greatly, believe me, and I'm not just saying that. I really do. Boguslaw, thank you so much, brother, for great storytelling and telling as usual. You're too kind, brother. You're too kind. Jean, I wish a creative year to all. My friend Jean from France. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Jean. We wish you, let me put that up there. We wish everybody the same too. We're going to continue this on every Saturday of 2021 that we can. And man, in a couple of, not even a couple of months, maybe in a couple of weeks, you'll be seeing me sitting in my new office in my house. At least I'll have my books and I can do that. Then the next iteration is my studio and darkroom. So we're working there. I'm jonesing, man. I am jonesing to make some photographs. I'm itching every day. My camera's here, my cooler's there, everything. I'm just itching to do it. I got to get my darkroom up, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Thank you so much. Polish, na zodri. I don't know how to say that. I'm not used to seeing consonants and together like that. But drawi. I'm not sure. But thank you. I'll practice. Man, Polish is so. We had Polish neighbors up in Denver. The Rogowskis, great people, George and Irina, and they both spoke fluent Polish. So I'd turn them on to Netflix movies only in Polish. I like to watch foreign films, and that language is so difficult for me. I'd hate to have to learn English if I wasn't an English speaker. I was talking about that last night. to my family, say, God, if we didn't speak English, I'd hate to have to learn English. So hats off to all you non-native English speakers. I am beside myself. Gracias por todo, amigo. Let's do it. Let's do it. You guys have a great, wonderful weekend. Stay safe. I'll see you next Saturday. Ciao. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Happy New Year. Happy New Year.